When a man begins to feel emotionally safe in a relationship, something inside him shifts in a way that is difficult to articulate, but deeply transformative. Emotional safety doesn't look like silence or surface-level peace. It looks like the comfort to say what he actually feels without fear of being misunderstood, judged, or punished. Most men are not walking around emotionally unavailable because they don't want connection. They are often unavailable because they've learned through experience that expressing their truth has consequences. It has meant being called weak. It has meant being told they're too much or not enough. It has meant having their vulnerabilities used against them later in moments of conflict or manipulation. So over time, they close off. They present only the acceptable parts of themselves, the parts that get praise, approval, or validation. But those parts aren't the full story. When a man meets someone who allows him to put the mask down, that moment sticks. It doesn't require dramatic conversations or overly emotional breakdowns. Sometimes it's as simple as asking how his day really was, and then actually listening, not to fix, not to respond, but just to understand. It's those moments when he says something a little deeper than usual and watches how you react. If you recoil, shut down, or dismiss him, the moment closes. But if you stay open, curious, and calm, he learns that this space is different. You're not here to mold him into your version of a perfect man. You're here to know him. Men are raised in a world that demands stoicism, reward achievement, and discourages emotional depth. So when a woman allows for softness, not by babying him or putting him on a pedestal, but by being human with him, it builds trust. He doesn't need someone to rescue him. He needs someone who can sit with him in silence without making that silence awkward. Someone who can hold his gaze when he doesn't have the answers. Someone who doesn't try to perform strength for him, but brings her own strength through patience, presence, and emotional maturity. Emotional safety also means he doesn't have to earn affection through perfection. Many men walk around with an invisible scoreboard over their heads. If they say the right thing, do the right thing, plan the perfect date, respond fast enough, express love in the right way, then they'll be appreciated. But the moment he senses that love is conditional, that you'll withdraw emotionally unless he performs to your expectations, he begins to emotionally detach. Not because he doesn't care, but because he can't keep up. He doesn't want to disappoint you, and if he thinks he's going to fail no matter what, he pulls away to protect himself. But when love is consistent and not weaponized, something powerful happens. He no longer sees you as someone he has to impress to keep. He sees you as someone who gets him. Someone who's not just impressed by his highlight reel, but is also intrigued by the parts he usually hides. That's what creates emotional intimacy. That's when he starts sharing things he hasn't told anyone. It could be a childhood memory, a quiet fear about the future, or even just a small insecurity he normally masks with humor. And when those pieces are met with understanding rather than judgment, a bond starts to form slowly, deeply, and authentically. There's another layer to this. Emotional safety is also about consistency during emotional moments. If every time he opens up, the conversation turns into a lecture or a shift in focus toward your feelings instead of his, he'll stop opening up. Emotional safety isn't just created in calm moments, it's tested in tense ones. Can you hold space for his emotion without making it about you? Can you allow him to feel confused, angry, or even shut down without rushing to make it better or demanding he snap out of it? That doesn't mean tolerating mistreatment or walking on eggshells. It means giving him the space to process emotion in a way that works for him, not just in a way that feels comfortable to you. You don't need to solve his problems. He probably doesn't want you to. What he wants is the freedom to have problems without it making him feel like less of a man. That freedom is rare. And rare things get protected. When a man feels like he doesn't have to keep up a facade with you, when he can admit he's scared or tired or unsure and you don't see him as broken, that's when he begins to attach. Because what you're offering isn't surface level approval, it's accept. It's easy to say I'll be here for you when things are easy, but emotional safety is proven in how you handle his silence, his sadness, his moments of withdrawal. Do you rush to accuse or do you stay present? Do you assume he's pulling away because he doesn't care, or do you understand that he might be processing in a way that's unfamiliar to you? When he learns that you won't punish him for needing space, but that you also won't disappear during that space, he starts to feel something he hasn't felt in a long time. He feels held. And when a man feels held, not physically but emotionally, he begins to associate you with peace, not boredom, not predictability. Peace. That's something he probably doesn't even know he's looking for until he finds it. Peace where he doesn't have to perform. Peace where he doesn't have to defend his masculinity. Peace where he doesn't have to hide his wound. You're not just another person in his life, you're the first one who gave him room to breathe. This kind of emotional safety isn't loud, it's not theatrical, it's quiet and steady. It shows up in your tone, in your pauses, in how you look at him when he's not saying anything, in how you don't rush to fill the silence or fix the broken pieces. It's in the way you let him have his pace while still staying connected. And when he finally sees that you don't need him to be invincible to be lovable, he'll let you into the part of himself he usually protects at all costs. Not because he has to, but because he wants to. Because with you it finally feels. There is a powerful transformation that happens in a man when he feels emotionally seen, not just acknowledged, not just praised for his achievements, but truly seen for who he is when no one else is looking. Most men navigate life with layers. There's the layer they show to the world, competent, capable, strong. There's the layer they show to people they trust a little more, playful, thoughtful, maybe even a little vulnerable. And then there's the layer underneath it all, the one they rarely reveal, the one that carries their insecurities, their quiet doubts, their sense of identity. When a woman sees that layer, recognizes it, and still embraces it, that's when emotional attachment begins to take root. You see, being admired is nice, compliments are appreciated, recognition feels good, but being seen goes far deeper. It's about someone recognizing the essence of who you are, especially the parts you didn't think were worth showing. It's about someone noticing the effort you put in when no one else is applauding. When you catch a man doing something small, something he didn't do to impress you, something he didn't even realize you saw, and you acknowledge it with warmth and sincerity, that moment becomes unforgettable. It tells him you're not invisible, you matter, even when you're not trying to be impressive. A lot of men walk through life being appreciated only for their utility, what they can do. They're often rewarded for their performance, their results, their ability to stay composed under pressure. But they're rarely appreciated for their inner world, their kindness, their integrity, their patience, their value. When you shift your attention from what he does to who he is, it triggers something he may not even know he was missing. It makes him feel like he doesn't have to keep performing to stay valuable, that he just as he is enough. This isn't about flattery or feeding his ego, it's about recognizing the soul behind the surface. It's about seeing the man who's generous, even when no one's keeping score. The man who questions himself late at night because he wants to get things right. The man who doesn't always have the answers but still shows up every day with intention. When you see that man and make it clear that you value him, not just when he wins but when he's still figuring things out, you create emotional resonance. It's easy to love someone's strengths, but emotional attachment grows when someone feels loved, despite their imperfection. When you tell a man, "I love how your mind works," or "I see how hard you try even when it's not perfect," or "I admire your honesty, even when it's uncomfortable," you go beneath the surface. You tap into the version of him that wants to be more than admired, he wants to be known. Men crave that space, even if they don't say it out loud. It's the place where he can talk about something close to his heart, without fear of being dismissed. The place where he doesn't have to package everything perfect. The place where he knows that if he reveals a less polished side of himself, he won't lose your respect. In fact, it might bring him closer to you. That space doesn't just make him open up, it makes him choose you emotionally, because he knows you see the things others overlook. Sometimes it's in the small observations. You notice the way he calms down when he's stressed by going quiet, and instead of demanding energy from him in that moment, you offer silence and presence. You notice how he encourages others when no one else does, and you tell him that his words matter. You pick up on how he carries responsibility even when it's heavy, and you appreciate the emotional weight he bears without needing him to collapse to prove he's tired. All of these are signals to him that you're not just paying attention, you're tuned in to who he is beneath the armor. What most people miss is that men, especially the emotionally guarded ones, often long to be seen in their complexity. not just as the protector, not just as the logical one, not just as the guy who keeps it all together, but also as someone who has doubts, who has been hurt, who sometimes feels unsure of himself. The world doesn't often reward that kind of honesty from men. But when you do, when you hold space for both the strength and the struggle, you give him permission to exist fully. And when a man feels he can exist fully with you, without filtering, without adjusting, without the constant need to prove, his emotional guard starts to fall. Not because you demanded it, but because he wants you to see more of it. There's another layer, and it's equally important. Being seen also means being challenged in a way that honors who he is. Not challenged with criticism or passive-aggressive tests, but challenged through truth and care. When you say, "I see how amazing you are, and I also know you're capable of even more," that's a beautiful form of love. You're not asking him to be different, you're showing him that you believe in his growth. That's a subtle but powerful difference. Men don't attach to people who idolize them, they attach to those who inspire them, who reflect their true self back to them, and also help them see who they're becoming. This connection doesn't happen overnight. It builds over moments where he lets you in a little and watches how you handle it, moments where you reflect something back to him that no one else ever bothered to see. Over time, those moments stitch together an experience of emotional depth, and the more you reflect his true self, not just his curated self, the more he starts to feel at home with you. Men don't fall in love with being needed, they fall in love with being understood. They get emotionally attached to the people who see them before they've fully proven themselves. The people who notice not just the results but the intentions, the quiet values, the emotional labor they often carry in silence. When he feels that kind of attention, it disarms him, it humbles him, it inspires loyalty not out of obligation, but out of emotional clarity. Because now he knows this isn't just attraction, this isn't just chemistry, this is someone who sees him in ways even he sometimes forgets to see himself.
There is something incredibly powerful that happens when a man begins to associate a relationship with personal growth, not forced growth, not guilt-driven change, but the kind of evolution that happens naturally, because your presence in his life makes him want to rise. When a man feels that being with you doesn't just feel good, but also pushes him to become a better version of himself, that's when something profound begins to shift inside him. He doesn't just enjoy your company, he values what your connection brings out of him. It's no longer just about love or attraction. It's about meaning, purpose, and alignment. Men aren't just looking for affection, they're looking for someone who expands their world. That doesn't mean someone who takes over, fixes him, or redirects his life path. It means someone who, by simply being who she is, raises the standard of what life could look like. When a man feels like he's evolving because of you, when he notices himself thinking differently, acting more intentionally, communicating more clearly, he begins to emotionally invest, not because he's trying to meet your expectations, but because being around you inspires a higher version of himself to come forward. It feels organic, not forced. The right kind of relationship doesn't make him feel like he has to abandon himself to be loved. It makes him feel like he's stepping into more of who he really is. And when he sees you doing the same, growing, stretching, not staying static, it creates this shared energy of movement. He feels like you're both on a journey, not standing still or stuck in old patterns. That shared sense of direction builds trust. It makes him feel like being with you is not just emotionally safe, but motivating. This type of dynamic doesn't mean you're constantly pushing him to do more or be better. In fact, it's usually the opposite. It's often your standards, your focus, your consistency, your self-respect that quietly challenge him to elevate, not through nagging, not through ultimatums, but through contrast, through example. He sees the way you carry yourself, how you handle disappointment, how you speak about your goals, how you honor your time, and he starts to reflect on whether he's doing the same, not because you asked him to, but because your presence acts like a mirror. One of the most intoxicating things for a man is when he feels like you're not just a partner, you're a catalyst. You don't make him feel small or inadequate, you make him feel capable. You show him by the way you carry your own life that growth is possible, and even joyful. If he spent years surviving, staying guarded, or being stuck in his routines, this feeling can be liberating. For many men, emotional attachment begins not just when they feel seen or safe, but when they start to like who they're becoming with you. That's a rare and beautiful thing. This also requires a level of emotional intelligence and patience, because growth isn't linear. A man might take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. There might be times when he resists, when he pushes back, when he doesn't immediately understand the gift of your influence. That's normal. It's not your job to drag him into self-awareness, but when you continue showing up as someone who believes in his potential without trying to control it, it builds something deeper than surface attraction. It creates respect, and with respect, emotional intimacy grows. Men don't attach to relationships where they feel judged or corrected, like a project. They attach to relationships where they feel supported and challenged in balance. Supported, meaning they're not torn down for where they are. Challenged, meaning they're not allowed to stay stuck forever. When a woman gets that balance right, when she speaks truth with love, when she holds her own standards while believing in his, it changes how he sees the relationship. He doesn't see it as a burden, he sees it as an asset, something that enriches him, that sharpens him, that makes his life better, not just happier but more purposeful. And this doesn't always show up in big dramatic ways. Sometimes it's in how you handle your own boundaries. Maybe you tell him what you will and won't accept, not with anger, but with clarity. Maybe you let him know that you won't chase inconsistency, but that you value consistency and connection. That kind of communication, though firm, creates a container where growth can happen. He learns that in your space, truth is welcome, but so is accountability. That blend makes him rise. It doesn't push him away if he's emotionally mature, it draws him closer. It also means you see his potential even when he can't. That doesn't mean excusing bad behavior or lowering your standards in the name of believing in someone. It means you have the emotional vision to recognize that the version of him you're connecting with now is just one chapter, and that the next chapter could be even better, not just for him, but for you both. If he feels like you're holding that vision with him, not dragging him toward it, but walking beside him, he begins to see you as a partner in his evolution. That's not a role it's a role you earn by being consistent, by living your truth, and by offering encouragement that's grounded in reality, not fantasy. Sometimes your growth alone is what inspires his. He sees you taking care of yourself, chasing your goals, evolving emotionally, and it creates momentum. He begins to feel like he doesn't want to fall behind, not in a competitive way but in a way that says, I want to keep up with her. I want to be someone who deserves this kind of woman. That's when emotional commitment starts to deepen, because now he's not just falling for you, he's rising with you. Men don't emotionally attach just because a relationship is pleasant, they attach because it matters. Because it pushes them toward a version of themselves they're proud of. And when he sees that you're not asking him to be perfect but simply to show up, to be honest and to grow alongside you, it removes the pressure and adds the incentive. That kind of relationship becomes unforgettable. Because it doesn't just offer comfort, it offers meaning. It doesn't just celebrate the present, it builds a compelling future. The relationship stops being something he needs to escape from during tough times, and starts being something he turns to because it reminds him of who he's becoming. You stop being just someone he dates, and start becoming someone he builds with. And once that connection forms, once that sense of progress, purpose, and partnership is felt, it doesn't fade easily. It roots deep because it was never about temporary excitement. It was about permanent growth. And that kind of bond is the one he'll keep choosing, again and again. Conflict is inevitable in any meaningful relationship. No matter how compatible two people are, no matter how deeply they connect or how much chemistry exists, there will be disagreements, miscommunications, and emotionally charged moments. The difference between relationships that grow stronger and those that fall apart lies not in whether conflict happens, but in how it's handled. For a man to become emotionally attached, one of the most critical elements he looks for, whether he consciously knows it or not, is how safe it feels to experience conflict with you. This doesn't mean avoiding hard conversations or pretending everything's fine when it's not. In fact, it's the opposite. Emotional safety in conflict means that when the tension rises, the foundation doesn't crumble. It means that even in disagreement, there's respect. Even when emotions are high, there's still an underlying belief that you're on the same side. This creates something powerful, trust in the relationship's durability. If a man feels like every disagreement threatens the relationship, he will start to emotionally withdraw, not because he doesn't care, but because he's trying to protect himself. If every time things get tough, you disappear, explode, or attack his character, it makes the relationship feel volatile and emotionally unsafe. But if he sees that the relationship can hold conflict without collapsing, it builds a layer of trust that no amount of surface-level harmony ever could. For many men, conflict is a trigger point, not necessarily because they're afraid of confrontation, but because they've learned over time that conflict often leads to emotional punishment. They may have been in situations where opening up during an argument led to being misunderstood or mocked, or maybe they've learned that it's safer to shut down than to say the wrong thing. So when he meets someone who can stay grounded in conflict, who doesn't throw low blows, who doesn't threaten the relationship, who doesn't shame him, he starts to feel something unusual. He feels emotionally secure even in the discomfort. This type of safety isn't passive. It's not about agreeing just to keep the peace. It's about being able to say I'm upset, or I need something different, without the fear of being torn apart for it. It's about knowing that a disagreement won't instantly flip the relationship upside down. When you can express your feelings clearly, calmly, and with compassion, even when you're hurt, it models something he might not even know he's been craving. It shows him that it's possible to face issues together, not as enemies, but as teammates. And this is where many relationships quietly fail, not because the love isn't real, but because the conflict isn't safe. If a man learns that the moment he messes up, he'll be stonewalled, belittled, or emotionally manipulated, he stops showing up with his full self. He starts measuring his worth. He starts avoiding honesty, not because he's dishonest, but because honesty starts to feel dangerous. But when conflict becomes a place where real communication happens, a place where he knows he can be messy, human, and still loved, that's where emotional attachment starts to deepen. Because the truth is, anyone can love you when things are easy. Anyone can support you when they're in a good mood, but what makes someone unforgettable is how they show up when it's hard, when you're frustrated, when he's defensive, when the misunderstanding spirals. If in those moments, you're able to ground the conversation in emotional maturity, it leaves a lasting impression, not because you avoided the problem, but because you handled it with grace. Handling conflict well doesn't mean never raising your voice or never getting emotional. You're human. You're allowed to feel what you feel. What matters is whether those emotions are used to connect or to control. Are you expressing to be understood, or are you lashing out to punish? Are you seeking resolution, or are you trying to win? Men can feel the difference. When a man experiences a conflict with you that ends in greater closeness rather than emotional distance, that becomes a reference point for him. He begins to trust that this relationship isn't just built for good times, it's built for real life. And that trust changes everything. Now when things feel off, he doesn't immediately retreat. He doesn't automatically assume the relationship is in danger. Instead, he engages because he knows you don't use conflict as a weapon. You use it as a tool for deeper connection. And that changes the way he sees you. You're no longer just someone who's fun or attractive or kind. You become someone who feels like home, stable, steady, safe. This doesn't mean conflict gets easy, but it does mean it stops being a threat. It becomes a challenge you can face together. When that shift happens, a man starts to emotionally invest differently. He stops trying to escape discomfort. He stops playing defense. He starts leaning in, because now he believes that even when things go sideways, you'll both find your way back. That belief creates emotional resilience. And emotional resilience is the backbone of attachment. What also makes a difference is the ability to repair. No matter how emotionally intelligent you are, there will be moments you both get it wrong. Maybe he says something careless, maybe you misinterpret his intention, maybe you both react instead of respond, but what matters most is what happens after. Can you circle back and say, hey, I could have handled that better, or I hear you now and I want to understand? That kind of repair not only diffuses tension, it builds the relationship. It teaches him that being imperfect doesn't mean being unloved. Men attach when they know they're not walking on eggshells, when they know they can show up as themselves, even when that self is emotional, messy,
or struggling. If every emotional moment turns into rejection or resentment, he'll keep himself guarded, but if emotional moments become pathways to connection, he'll start to lower the walls, he'll start to let you into the places he usually keeps hidden. And once you're allowed into those places, that's when real emotional intimacy is formed. So when a man feels like he can navigate tension with you and still feel respected, still feel chosen, still feel emotionally close, that's when something inside him begins to settle. He begins to believe in the strength of the bond, he stops fearing rupture, he starts embracing depth, because now he knows that loving you doesn't require pretending everything is perfect. It requires honesty, effort, and the ability to walk through fire together without getting burned. And once he has that experience with you, he stops looking for anything else, because emotional safety in conflict isn't just rare, it's the kind of thing that makes him stay. So in the end, emotional attachment isn't created through pressure, performance, or perfection. It's built moment by moment through safety, depth, and truth. When a man feels he can be vulnerable without being judged, when he knows he's seen and accepted for who he truly is, when your presence inspires him to grow, and when even conflict becomes a space for connection rather than destruction, something shifts in him. He stops holding back. He starts choosing more intentionally, because now it's not just about chemistry or attraction, it's about alignment, meaning, and the rare feeling of being home with someone. When those 7 moments happen, he doesn't just love you, he attaches deeply and wholeheartedly. And that kind of bond isn't just felt, it's kept.